The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 110. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field to talk shop. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube, or join the mailing list at ronmckeefery.com to stay up to date with the latest guests and anything else that I have going on. This week, super excited to have a good longtime friend of mine, Ted Lambrinides. Dr. Ted is a mentor with one of my mentors, Mark Sonovich at Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and got a chance to get to know him through Coach Sonovich, and just a guy that is, just as smart as they come, and constantly been a resource throughout my career, and just has a unique knack for getting to the core things, being able to simplify the complex. And so we get into his journey. He's been all over. He's done pretty much every job you can possibly do in strength and conditioning. We talk about, the profession and the direction of the profession. We get into kind of how, motivating athletes, motivating staff, and just lots of little tidbits that you can take away. But I know you're going to get a ton out of this episode. Before you do, I want to make sure we recognize all of our sponsors. We have Sorinex.com, EliteForm.com, Ignition APG.com, and of course PlayUSA. And can't say enough about what Play's got going on right now. That seems like every time I turn around, they are installing in some of the best facilities around the country. Just so you go to their website, PlayUSA.com, and you can see in Penn State, the Under Armour facility, Colorado, Georgia, on and on and on. And just got by far have the top product out there right now. And if you're in the market for sports flooring, reach out to Rich, Gray, the rest of the gang, and just let them know what you got going on. And these guys, Rich's former strength coach, they're not, they don't hard sell, they don't do any of that. They basically just kind of show you what they have to offer, and it just happens to be the best product out there right now. So reach out to them, go to PlayUSA. Sign up for their mailing list, join their Facebook page, and, check out what they have going on. Also want to let you know about Strength On Demand. Strength On Demand is an online archive of strength and conditioning clinic presentations that myself, Rob Taylor, put together. It's just a great way to sharpen the sword and stay consistent. If you've got summer months right now and you had some time, join Strength On Demand. And be able to go, you got a clinic in your pocket. And that was kind of the thought process. I wanted a central depository for all these clinic videos that I had and been able to get access to. And so well worth it, well worth the time. Check that out, strength-ondemand.com. Want to get to this week's guest? Make sure you sit back, take lots of notes, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, welcome back. Excited to have a good buddy of mine on the show. The one and only Dr. Ted. Known Dr. Ted for a long time, and just been a mentor of mine. He's a mentor of my mentors, and so that's always one of those deals where, you hold him in high regard just without even talking to him. And then you talk to him for a second, and he's just a guy that's always given back to the profession, given to you as a coach. And so, man, I truly appreciate you coming on the show, bud.
Oh, I thank you for having me, Ronnie.
Ted, you've been all over, man. You've pretty much done about every single role you can possibly do in strength and conditioning. Talk a little bit about your journey, going back to why you got into the profession, stops along the way, and then kind of what you're currently doing.
Actually, I got in the profession as a result of, to play college football. So I said, boy, I got to get bigger. I got to get stronger. I got to get faster.
Absolutely.
So at that time, 1977, 78, you had to sort of research it on your own. And sort of hit or miss. You do a lot of, methods that you read in a magazine article, and you go out and you try it and see if it works. So I really got into it to, what I wanted to get in the best possible shape to play college football. And so I played a year at the University of Dayton. And then from there, I go, you know what, I don't know if I have a great future in football as much as I liked it. But I wasn't real satisfied with the particular academic program I was in at the University of Dayton. So I transferred to Ohio State. And I had a friend of mine that was involved in the athletic training program there. And he says, we've got a GA position open, in strength conditioning. And at the time, Steve Bliss was the strength coach at Ohio State. So I called up and said, I'm not a graduate student, but can I apply for that position? He goes, sure, come on over and interview. So I went over, I interviewed with Steve Bliss, and he says, you know what, I'm going to bring you on board as my student assistant.
That's awesome.
And so it was a great experience. I think along with that is the advice I can give the younger coaches is you got to suck scum. And that is, all right, you're going to help out with the workouts. I went this room spotless. You're going to work 60-some hours a week. And you better make sure you got good grades at the same time. So in terms of time management, taking care of, and at that time, it was just Steve Bliss and I running all the programs for Ohio State.
Wow.
We had a 1,600 square foot weight room. And so when you think about that,
quite a bit different now.
Yeah, you think about that, and you go, boy, how did we do that? But that's part of coaching is making do with what you have.
That's absolutely right.
And I think the thing that benefited also was we had a great exercise physiology program at Ohio State. So you could ask questions in class and then go see if you could apply that, while you were working with the athletes. But the other thing I thought was beneficial was I had the opportunity to be with a lot of great assistant coaches, both football and in other sports. So you would go out, and my first year at Ohio State, Pete Carroll was our DB coach.
Wow.
And then he left, and Nick Saban replaced him. And then he left, and Dom Capers replaced him. Mark D'Antonio was a graduate assistant with me. Jim Tressel was an assistant coach. Glenn Mason.
Wow.
And then when I left, Urban Meyer came in as a graduate assistant. And it was really a great experience because you would go out on the practice field, sit there, make yourself invisible, and just see how they teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I know coming from Ohio State, Woody Hayes, his big thing was is if you can't teach, you can't coach. So you'd look at, how do they communicate? How do they get across? And, Nick Saban and Pete Carroll, when those guys are tremendous teachers. And so it was a great experience. And then, I stayed at Ohio State, did my bachelor's, master's, my doctoral work there. And Steve Bliss was great to work for. And what we also started there was a program. It was a master's degree in strength and conditioning. So I did like a sort of the beta test for the program. So I would go out and help set up a high school program, and so that would be after hours. And as a result, we had Chip Morton, Mickey Marotti,
Mark was
Ken Manny. We had a whole slew of strength coaches that were involved in that program. So they got to work with the Ohio State programs.
Right.
And they each had their own program to run out of high school. So it was a great experience because everybody says, well, when I get my shot,
that's right.
Here it is. You've got, 12 high school teams to train. You've got an 800 square foot weight room. Figure it out.
That's exactly
and I think
right.
Those guys will all attest to the fact that was a great learning experience for them. And they all made great connections, in the coaching community as a result of that program. We've all maintained those friendships,
right?
30 years now, and so it was, it was a very good experience there. And so that, from there, when I was at Ohio State, I would come down and I called up the Cincinnati Bengal coaches and said, "Hey, listen, can I come down? I'd like to observe, during mini camp."
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I established a really good relationship with Kim Wood and Pete Brown of the Bengals, and went to work for those guys for about 15 years. And with that, I got to do a lot of consulting work. Had interaction with a lot of professional collegiate teams, and that was a good experience. And what was really good is I got to go to a lot of different college and pro programs and establish relationships with coaches.
Yeah.
I went over to East Germany and Russia in '87 on an NSCA trip. Dana LeDuc, Brad Roll, Dr. James Wright, Doc Crease, LeBaron Carruthers.
Yeah.
So it was, I had some, very, very interesting, experiences. And I think that's the one great thing about this field is, you always got to continue to try to improve and see what else is out there and, expand your horizons.
Absolutely.
So, I worked at that. As you said, for 3 years I was at the University of Kentucky with Ray Oliver, helping run the strength and conditioning program there. And, as anybody that's in the collegiate or professional ranks, that as soon as you get hired, that little sand dial turns over. It's a question of, when you get fired. You look at those experiences and, you have to say to yourself that it's business, it's not personal, or else you'll drive yourself nuts.
Exactly right.
If you think otherwise. But, the other advice to a lot of young strength coaches out there is you always have to keep your eye on plan B. What if, this happens? So you have to make sure professionally that you're prepared, to be a little bit flexible. Obviously you'd love to stay in a job for 25 years. But that becomes a little harder in today's sport. And then you go, boy, if that happened, I'd like to, at least stay in it. But sometimes, situations come up, you gotta, hey, I've got to go into the private sector. And how is that? How is that different?
Right.
Working for a team. And what was interesting for me was, coming back into the collegiate ranks. When I was at Ohio State, there was no 20-hour rule, and so the rules were a lot different. So you look at how you programmed athletes throughout the course of the day, fit it into that schedule. So it was a very good learning experience.
Sure. There's tons of great things that I kind of want to pull out a little bit. One, let's talk a little bit about that program that you guys established, because Mark was a part of that too, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
So one of my greatest mentors, Mark Asanovich, was in that program. Ken Manny, Chip Morton, another mentor. Just a fantastic program, and it's something that's probably just as applicable today as it would be back then. I mean, there's lots of coaches that are listening that are looking for additional help. I mean, we just had a strength coach here yesterday that from a small school that it was him and 20 sports, and so how did you kind of go about setting that program up, and then kind of what was the structure and the pay, and how would you recommend people doing it now?
To set the beta program in motion, we worked with Worthington High School. So that was the first high school. So I met with all the coaches, the athletic director, and got the schedule in terms of who has priority of the weight room at this time of year, that time of the year. We would figure out how we would do the assessments, so we actually show that these athletes are receiving the results and adaptations that we're claiming. So over the course of a year, everybody was on board. Boy, we had somebody dedicated to running this. So we would go to the other high schools, and as a result, the high school would pay Ohio State University money. And so the individuals involved, they would get their tuition paid for, and they would get a stipend for room and board.
Right.
And I think at the time, so we got our tuition waived, and I think we got like $550 a month, to live on. So
sure.
In the morning, you would help out with maybe training the the football team, basketball team, wrestling team, etc. And then you had to be at the high school about 2:45 when school let out, and then you were there to whenever you finished that training day.
Right.
And then sometimes if you didn't have to study later, and we had late sessions that evening, you go back to the facility and help out.
Yeah.
But what was interesting for those guys is they would come in and help out training the football team, and they would compare notes. What are you doing with your team? Or I've owned it. I've got 5 racks. I've got 1 rack. So
Absolutely.
they would sit there and bounce ideas off each other and compare notes. If you had a difficult head coach to deal with, what strategies did you use to deal with that?
Sure.
So it was, if you think about it from a high school's perspective, they were paying a tuition for a student, and they were getting, essentially, individual to come in. And if they needed other assistance, or in terms of, let's just say that, hey, could you bring one of your professors in to give a talk on, eating disorders or cutting for wrestlers? A lot of those resources were available.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah, absolutely. We've done something similar where we would partner with the performance facility, and so we basically gave them a full-time employee, with 2 people. You paid 20 hours, and you had somebody for the morning. We had them in the afternoon, and vice versa. But I think that's you got to be creative when you're in those situations. When you're in a 1,600 square foot weight room, and you got all the sports, and you got to. I think another thing you touched on that's so great is, and I know this about you, but is the relationship building. Every step along the way, you've built these relationships, and it's easy to get caught up and be like, oh well, Urban Meyer's just a GA. What's he gonna do? And then it turns out the guy's he's winning national championships now. Right. As an intern, you get caught up in just trying to know who the coordinators and the head coach are, but there's a bunch of GAs and there's a bunch of quality control people and things like that running around that are all in the same boat. That's you build those relationships; those can last a career.
Absolutely.
Not just that, and then obviously within the community. And so, I think that's a fantastic point you mentioned. One thing else you mentioned is the plan B. And having gone through a situation like that, you've gone through it. Strength coaches, if you're in this field for any amount of time, it's kind of having a plan B or figuring out how you can do what you do and have security somehow, some way, which is what I've tried to do. But I think, one thing you did is way back when you had the foresight to go and get an advanced degree. You went and got your doctorate degree. Talk a little bit about why you did that way back when and then how that served you as far as, having a level of calmness when things have gone south throughout your career.
Well, when I was at Ohio State, I was there year round. So it wasn't like, hey, can I go home this summer? That was not an option. So I finished my bachelor's in 3 years. I finished my master's in 1. They go, well, you're too young. Why don't you stay and work on your doctorate? So I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. So it's sort of like, boy, you're young. We don't want you to leave. Why don't you stay?
Sure.
So I said, what the heck, So I thought that the knowledge you gained from that would always be beneficial. So I think the one thing you find, at least at Ohio State, that it's a high pressure job, and if you don't have concrete skin, you don't survive working there.
Right.
And so, once again, it's expectations are high, and you have to be, there's no B game. You're on your A game, every day. And I thought that if I could work in that environment, if I ever had to work in the private sector or business sector, I go, boy, it will be easy.
Yeah.
Because
I hear you there.
If you have a head coach that, jumps your ass, you don't see that, some people can say, oh, yeah, my boss jumped my ass today. It isn't the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not the same thing.
So, but it was, you see how people handle pressure, how they handle adversity. And, while I was at Ohio State, we had a situation where, we had a quarterback that had a gambling problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look back and you say, boy, you got a 20-year-old quarterback that's drinking like 3 bottles of Maalox a day. He might have some stress in his life.
Yeah.
In what form? For what from? some of the support systems or some of the red flags, may have been ignored.
Mm-hmm.
But that certainly doesn't help if you got a you got a guy that owes bookies, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You go, boy, is this guy giving us everything he's got?
Right.
So, that was an interesting experience, to be with. But when you talked about the relationship building, those take time. And you see guys that'll leave a program, and I go, hey, you make sure you stay in contact with that.
Right.
With that guy, and I would always tell, when we had new GAs come in to help, I said, why don't you go visit that coach, over spring break. Go visit the guy, and when you get done, send him a handwritten note.
Right.
I said, people remember that.
Absolutely, still do.
And probably in today's world, it's a handwritten note. What is this?
Stands out more than absolutely. You're right.
So, and then you go. I remember, when Bruno Paletto was at Tennessee, I would call up and say, hey, I'm going to be through the area. Can I come by and watch you guys train some groups? And he was always gracious. Oh, welcome.
Yeah.
So, and that's how I got to know Phil Emery. He was an assistant there, and I would sit there and just, watch come training groups. So, if you're a young coach, go learn. You'll pick something up. It could be the technique they're teaching on a particular exercise, or how they organize their groups. You'll pick up something. But it was, that's the kind of stuff that, if I was always making trips and I could stop in and see somebody and watch a training group, that was always, and it still is beneficial to me.
No doubt. We make our interns take a site visit every semester, and like exactly. I mean, you can even just walk into a weight room without talking to anybody and pick something up sometimes. And you mentioned the stress. I mean, and you mentioned dealing with difficult coaches sometimes. I mean, there's Woody Hayes. I know it's a difficult coach to deal with sometimes. Jim Leavitt is a hard coach to work for. That I kind of came up under. What are some tricks that you had? I mean, what are some things that you would say to young coaches that are in those scenarios that they're dealing? Because I'll tell you, with looking backwards now, I think you would agree with me. Made me the coach I am today. It gave me exactly what the tough skin, like you said, or just I find myself saying a lot of the same things, that they were saying, but now it makes sense. And back then it was just being, I was being picked on, but. What would you say to young coaches that are dealing with coaches that are hard to work for? But what are some tips to kind of get through that?
Listen to the message, not the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, and then sometimes you may have screwed up. Fess up to it.
That's right.
But that's why check your work, recheck your work, and recheck it again.
Yep.
And then if there's something that the coach wants you to do and you're not doing it, you better do it.
Right.
But, I would, I think those are the biggest things. Listen sometimes to stuff that he's not saying.
That's right.
He might be saying something to another coach, but you could gain from that information.
No, I agree with 100%.
Right. And then, always stay on top of your game. And what I mean on top of your game, in today's world, you got to know what other people are doing, what emerging technology is. I've been in staff meetings where they'll go, we've had a lot of brachial plexus problems. What is it and why are we getting them?
Yep. So
you got to, be able to answer that on the spot. Not sound like, Jackie Gleason, hubba, in a staff meeting. But the other thing with regard to the stress in this profession is the hardest thing is how do you keep a balance between being a coach and your family?
Absolutely.
And I know that's probably the toughest thing. You've got to marry obviously the right person.
Right.
Because if you marry somebody that wants you to do a 9-to-5 job,
not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. But it's tough. You've got to really make sure that you schedule your day, accordingly, and then. I've heard, I don't know, the guy that he won the Arthur Ashe Courage Award a few years ago, and he just died maybe a year ago, Don Meyer.
Okay.
And Don Meyer would make his assistant coaches and his players every week. He had a piece of paper, and they had to put down all their different roles in life. I'm a teammate, I'm a son, I'm a grandson, I'm a brother, I'm a cousin. Some instances they were a father.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing each week to attend to those different roles in your life? And it could be on Monday, hey, I've got to make sure on Monday I call my grandmother. On this day I got to make sure I'll call my brother or my sister. And so he made those guys aware, outside of just being a good teammate, you got to be a good person and attend to all those different areas in your life and try not to neglect those. And it takes organizational skills. And then he'd have them write down, all right, what time are you going to be doing your homework? If you got to do laundry, what time are you doing laundry during the week? So these kids had to fill out a schedule each week.
Wow.
And that's not a bad idea, for young coaches. Or, if you're going to have a date night with your girlfriend, better put it down in the program.
No doubt.
Or, I think somewhere I read, they said that the average father spends 5 minutes a day with their son or daughter, one-on-one FaceTime.
Wow.
You should have guys, well, I'm home.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't mean just because you're, in the same house that, you're communicating by osmosis.
Yeah.
So when you look at it as strength coaches, or if you're even in the private sector, you've got more contact on a daily basis than most of these guys have with a parent.
Right.
So if you are a parent, you got to make sure, hey, I got to make sure I spend, more than 5 minutes quality time with my son or my daughter on this day. And I'll never forget, they asked this one kid, he was a grown adult, and his dad was a very successful physician. And he asked, what was your most famous Christmas present? He says it was a box, and it was just a piece of paper inside. It had 365. He goes, you got 1 hour with me every day this whole year.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty good.
So, those are the things that take, you got to plan for it. That just doesn't happen. Because, there's a saying, and I think this can apply to a lot of coaches, and the quote is, unlived parts of life avenge themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tough profession. And I think there was a really good article, the Arkansas State head coach, Coach Anderson, I believe.
Yeah.
And he talked about his year out of football, getting back to his family.
Oh, yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you read that article, and you look at how Urban has approached things this second time. You have to, prepare for those types of things if you're, you're in this profession.
Absolutely. Well, we talk about this a lot on the show, but I always say that you have to work as hard on your family as you do on your profession. And so many times we'll read every book there is about strength and conditioning. But when's the last time you read a parenting book or read a relationship book or whatever it may be? And so I always try to rotate. I read a strength and conditioning book, I read a leadership business book, and I read a family book, and I go on that rotation through all my deals. But I couldn't agree with you more. We just got done. My son and my daughter just got done working out with me just a few minutes ago.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, it's you got, but it's tough. You got to schedule it in, and time management skills is critical for strength coaches. One of the things we talk about quite a bit, and one of the things I've been most impressed with you through the years, getting to know you, is just whether it's you're talking to me, and I'm talking about just trying to get some guidance, or I see you interacting with an athlete or talking about an athlete that you worked with. You seem to have a real knack for getting to the core of the issue, getting to the core of the athlete very, very quickly. What are some tips you have for young coaches or coaches in general about just connecting? You talk about, like you said, you got more than 5 minutes sometimes with these guys. That's more than they have with their own dad, their own parent. What needs to happen in that so that you can really draw upon that later on to ask them to go past their comfort zone?
It goes back to that, the one quote, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And, be yourself, be very sincere. With a lot of the NFL players that I work with, I'm not a big yeller, and I think they respect that.
Yeah.
And, I talk to them, encourage them, always asking them, about their mother or father. I want to know as much about them. And, so when they'll come in, if they got a son or a daughter, or, if their mom is sick, boom, that's the first thing I'll ask them about. So I think that's the first thing, is I treat them as a person first, and then as an athlete second. And
absolutely.
I found that to be a good strategy. And then I think they like the fact that I push them, but I don't bark at them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
Go ahead. In those lines, I mean, when you're in a pro setting, I feel like that works really, really well. In a college setting, when you got these big bravados and you got to have this dynamic personality and all that. I mean, have you found that the same approach works just as well?
I think you have to be a little bit more vocal in college, because sometimes I think it's harder to get their attention.
Yeah. Agree.
You're usually working in a larger group,
mm-hmm.
and if you do find that hey, I got this one kid in this one group, I really got to try to connect. You may have to go to his dorm room after hours.
Yeah.
Because hey, I just want to let you know, hey, I heard about your sister. Is there anything else I can do for you?
Mm-hmm. Takes those other 22 hours, right? You got them for the 2 hours. It's the other 22 hours that you got to find a way to be involved in.
Right. And the one thing you see, a lot of times you'll hear assistant coach, these kids today, it's easy to bitch,
mm-hmm.
About. But when you go in and you watch the teams, having a training table, and you see a table of coaches, and then you see the rest of the team, I'm going, that's a problem.
That's right.
Go over there and talk with your players.
I agree.
And so, that's one thing I saw where, hey, I'll go and, sit next to a kid, and maybe this kid was second team. Now he just got demoted to third. And he just looks like he just lost his puppy dog.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, hey, you keep it up. And to be perfectly honest, I'm telling you why you're down third team now. It's not because they don't like you.
Right.
And I think that the coaches need to do a better job of that. Or you get a kid who goes, hey, I thought I was going to be playing last week. I practiced the game plan, and I didn't even get in.
Right.
And I think coaches, sometimes you got to communicate. Maybe before the game.
Agreed.
This is why you're not going to, you might get in a little bit this week, but you're going to get in a lot next week, and this is because of why. It's communication. And you have to, I think that's crucial as a strength coach or as a head coach or position coach. And, what is it? The NCAA did a survey a couple years ago. 75% of NCAA athletes do not trust their head coach.
Wow.
So that means when you're in there giving a talk to that team, and you're the head coach, 75% of those people just don't trust you. That's a major problem.
Where did you see that?
I think the NCAA commissioned that study, and it was all sports, just wasn't football.
Yeah.
So, you always hear these coaches talking about trust and family and commitment. Well, trust a lot of times is based off communication.
Absolutely.
So if these guys feel your staff and you are not communicating well, as a staff, hey, we got to improve upon that. It's just like you take anything. We had a horrible, pass defense session. We got to really work on that. If you find out great communicators, you got to work on that.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about on the show. I think the one thing that's a lost art, but the ones that separate the great from the good, I think, is the ability to have a tough conversation and still walk away with them believing in you personally, and trusting you personally. And I think, especially nowadays, these athletes where they're able to get information from a lot of different places, and there's a lot of people that aren't being 100%, forthright with them. The tough conversations, I've found, at least personally, that they appreciate it so much more. you know,
Right.
and they'll always come back and tell you that after the fact. It may not go down well right away, but typically they'll come back. And I couldn't agree with you more on that. You know, you've been in the profession for a long time. You've been in pro, you've been in college, you've been in performance facilities, you've been in college weight rooms and consulted and all these different things. Where do you see the profession going? And kind of, again, where would you recommend these young coaches really start to kind of separate themselves out from, in a very competitive job market? How can they separate themselves?
Ooh. When I taught for 18 years. I taught college, and I would always ask my students, if you're going in for a job, let's just say 5 of you going interviewing for the same job, why should I hire you?
Right.
What is it that you're going to bring to the table? And so a lot of these, I would talk to them. I go, "Are you going in for a job?" I go, "Did you get online and try to find out as much about the people that are going to interview you? Did you do your homework on that?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find out who are the 3 biggest competitors for the business that you're going to be interviewing for?" So it's an information intelligence gathering.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter if you're in the business world or you're going in for a strength coaching job. Find out, if I'm going in, I'm going to interview, who was this coach's mentors. What do you think his likes or dislikes are? If you've looked at some of the other assistants that he's hired in the past, what qualities did they have that he liked? And you've got to do, it's called, need satisfaction selling. They tell you that in business classes.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what needs he has, and then when you communicate during the interview, you got to satisfy those needs he's looking for.
Great point. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We call it, we always tell them it's your unique selling proposition, your USP. What's different about you, and always having that elevator pitch ready to go. This is me in a 5-minute elevator ride, and getting them excited about you personally, and
Right.
that's it goes back to relationships. I always tell them you got to tell a story as well. It's not, if you just tell me, well, I've got a degree and I got this and I got that, but if you go into, all right, I was raised by a single mom and I had to go basically put myself through college, and this is what I chose to do, and put all, then people are going to identify more with the story than,
Right.
this is what I did. But
Yeah, I heard it was interesting. Somebody asked Kevin Tolbert what qualities he was, they look at when they hire assistants. And he said when he was in the Navy, he was a young ensign, and one of the commanding officers came up to him and says, "Understand this, your job is to make me look good."
That's right.
So I tell young guys when I go in for interviews, I go, you better be proficient in every type of training philosophy, exercise, execution.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy owns the restaurant. He has his menu set. You better be prepare every dish on that menu.
That's right.
He's not asking you to create the recipes. They're already set. He wants you to make the recipes that he has prepared.
That's a great
Someday
analogy.
you'll have your own restaurant. You can make your own recipes.
A great analogy. I'm using that one. I'm stealing that one from you, buddy. That's awesome. Well, along those lines, and we always kind of end the show with some resources here. But what is an interview question? I mean, I know why, but what's an interview question that you've used in the past to kind of really separate out the bunch? What's your trip 'em up question?
Really, where do you want to be in 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Why do you feel like that is
What are
telling?
what are your goals? Can I help you achieve those goals? Is this going to be the right place for you to achieve what your goal is?
Mm-hmm.
It may not be, but and then I'll say, listen, I what would be better for you than coming here? I'm going to make a call for this one person, and if they have an opening, I think you'd be perfect for there, based off where you want to be in 5 years.
Sure.
But I don't know if it's a trip 'em up question, but who was it? They asked one team. I know a guy was getting interviewed by one of them. This is at the combine, and they go, "Do you know who our head coach is?" player didn't.
Wow.
So I guess you could ask that. You know who our head football coach is, or you know who our head basketball coach is?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You know, have you done a little bit of research? I mean, there's only 32 teams in the NFL, and you can't tell me who our coach is.
Yeah, I bet you that did probably trip up a lot of guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a critical piece. And I kind of think it goes back to some of the things you talked about, and what I think was great going back all the way back to the Ohio State story and getting young coaches in, developing them. They're working in the restaurant, but they're getting a chance to go out and run their own restaurant a little bit. But you don't personally, I don't think you get in this business to be an assistant. I think you get in this business to get an opportunity to go run your own show, and you have to have that kind of drive. I think once you've had your own restaurant, sometimes you realize that it's not all it's cracked up to be. But because you have to be, what we talk about on the show, you have to be more than just a technician, more than just a strength coach. You have to be a manager, and you have to be an entrepreneur, and you have to kind of always be all three of those. And but I think it's important that everybody kind of has that. I tell my assistants flat out, I want you out of here in 3 years. I want you to be a head guy in 3 years. And that's what I'm training you to do. And outside of that, if it goes outside of that, great. I get a good person for an extra year, but I want them to challenge themselves. And I think that's an important way to do that. I think that's growth. But what about you mentioned a couple quotes? You got any favorite quotes that you live by?
I have quotes all over my office. I wrote down one Joe Paterno had on his desk. And the quote was, "Don't bitch about the kids; they're the only ones you got."
That's right.
So when you're in certain settings, you've got to remind yourself that don't bitch about the kids; they're the only ones we got. I mean, we got to make those guys feel special.
No doubt.
That's who we have.
The
other one was I got this one from Kim Wood's 8th grade English teacher: "Read not to believe, but to weigh and consider."
Yeah.
And so I always like that one.
I always use the they're ugly babies, but there are ugly babies. Yeah. What about you've given lots of coaching advice, but what's kind of been the best piece that you've ever received?
Best piece of advice. That's a tough one. I would say I heard John Harbaugh speak a couple years ago, and he said the most important aspect of coaches now is relationship building. He goes, and that's everybody in that building, not just your players, not just your assistant coaches, it's the secretaries, it's the custodians, it's the cooks. He says that takes time and effort. He says not just going down the hallway and say, "Hey, how you doing, hey Ron?"
Right.
But say, "Hey Ron, how you doing? How's those kids doing? You got to work out with them today? That's great."
That's right. Yeah.
He goes, "You got to do that with everybody in that building." He says, and boy, that's challenging.
No doubt.
But when things aren't going real good, wins, losses, if you don't have those relationships, man,
Oh yeah.
Words on that deck start to pop. The nails pop up, and oh, geez. So,
couldn't agree more.
I would say that advice wasn't given to me, but I think in today's non-communication world with kids and everybody's just doing this, that if you're going to have a strong unit there, whether it be your staff, the surrounding football staff, with the rest of the athletic department and the academics there at the school, you've got to take the time to establish those relationships. I mean, I think that's the best piece of advice, and always improve what you're doing.
I agree.
Every year there's a new version of you, and it better be better than last year.
That's right.
Because if not, there's somebody. There was an interesting article. It was in Business Week. They did a special edition on winners and losers. And in the business world, like the majority of the workforce feels you should eliminate the bottom 10% performers in the company every year. So,
Dang.
you know, that's that stuff's you got to perform.
Yeah.
You know, you're a CEO and the shareholders don't think their dividends are as high as you're fired.
Right.
So a lot of times we look at coaching profession as being cold blooded. I'm telling you, this world that's cold blooded. and what drives a lot of college strength coaches nuts. It's not the football staff. It's not the strength staff.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they walk through the athletic administrative building and they see people that have been there for 40 years.
Yeah.
And they're going, well, we've never done that before. We can't do that. And if you're in the business world and you've got somebody that's like, they're gone.
Right.
You got to earn. You're not entitled to your job. You got to earn your job.
Mm-hmm.
Every day you come in, and you got to have that mindset as a strength coach. Earn it every day. You're not entitled to it.
Right.
Complacency. When I was at Kentucky, they did interviews with us. And they asked, "Oh, what is your biggest fear?" And somebody said, "Oh, spiders or snakes." I said, "Complacency."
Yeah.
Because if I ever become complacent, I said, you fire me on the spot because I'm not giving you what I should be giving you if I become complacent.
Couldn't agree more. What about a book, app, or website recommendation?
I just finished reading a book. It was called Bad Science by Ben Goldacre. Very interesting book. I would recommend that.
You said Ben what?
Ben Goldacre. So it's Gold, ACRE.
I haven't read that one. Pretty good?
Yeah, very good. Easy read, but very enlightening.
Great. That's a good one. Well, buddy, I'd taken a ton of your time, man, but I truly appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the relationship and just the role you've been in my career and just always giving me
I know. Hey, the internship and interns that you've affected and helped develop over the years, it's, I take my hat off to you for that. You've done a tremendous job with that when you're at South Florida, now that you're at Eastern and at Tennessee. So keep it up. Keep up the great work. It has a positive impact on the whole profession.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. See you, man.
Alrighty, take care.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.